everybody. Happy Wednesday. Happy end of the heat wave to those here in Ontario. I am going to share my screen and jump into things. We have our Teach in Australia Ask Me Anything webinar happening tonight. I will jump right in just to introduce myself. My name is Victoria. I'm the Global Opportunities Consultant on the ANZUK Canadian / North American team. I am an Ontario-based teacher and I taught in Australia myself back in 2023, but I'm now very lucky to get to do this full time and talk to other educators who are interested in going to Australia, New Zealand, or the UK and answer all of the questions. But I am very fortunate tonight to be joined by two other educators who have also gone and taught abroad and gotten to do that experience as well. So I'm going to quickly run through all of the main administrative stuff that you need to know from a company standpoint, and then we will open it up for questions. I did look at all the questions people have asked, so thank you for asking your questions. We'll try to go through everything. If you do have more, feel free to drop them in the chat as we go, and we will get to all of the questions at the end. If there are any specific questions that can't be answered quickly, I will follow up with you via email and we can set aside some time for a one-to-one call, but we'll try and go through the grand scheme today. But Mark, do you want to quickly introduce yourself and tell us who you are, where you taught, and all that good stuff?
Yeah, cool. So my name's Mark. I'm from Ontario. I guess I'm from Hamilton more specifically, and I teach with the Halton School Board, Halton District School Board. And when I was overseas, I taught in Melbourne as well in Australia. That was back in 2022, 2023. And then this last year, I was teaching in the UK. Now I've moved kind of back to Ontario, Toronto. So yeah, nice to meet you all, and I'm excited to answer some questions you have.
Thanks, Mark. Claudia, do you want to share as well?
Yeah, for sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Claudia. I'm currently living in North Bay, Ontario, and I work for the Nipissing Parrytown Catholic District School Board here in North Bay. I moved to Melbourne, Australia in July 2023, and I was on the working holiday visa there for 12 months. I mainly taught phys ed while I was there. That's my teachable. And now I am back living in North Bay after my amazing year away. I'm looking forward to answering any questions that you may have.
Claudia? Perfect. Okay. Let's jump into the nitty gritty. So I know we have quite a mixture of people tonight, some who have had conversations with either myself or Olivia previously, some who are totally new. So I'm going to go through a bit of the administrative stuff on visas, getting your teaching license, what we offer. But I will also follow up with some more detailed webinars if you want kind of everything laid out for you. I'll be sending those over as well. So today will just be kind of breezing through those so that we can get to the questions because I want to have time to answer everyone's questions. Let's actually, with that, we have a phenomenal Vimeo page that I'll be sending out tomorrow along with this webinar recording called Travel and Teach Abroad. It has all of the webinars we've done from the last about year and a half. So if you are interested in moving to Australia long term, there's a great webinar there. If you want to work out in the regional settings, phenomenal webinar. The other really, really great one that I always refer people to is this Where to Live in Melbourne webinar. It's about half an hour and it goes through how to find housing, what to expect, all the different areas to live in, and how do I find housing is probably the #1 question that we get from educators. So it's a really phenomenal webinar. So you'll be sick of listening to my voice by the end of it, but there's a ton of phenomenal information on that page. So definitely check it out if you are looking for more process type questions. All right. Introduction to ANZUK. So we are a global teaching agency that has existed for over 20 years now, founded back in 2004 in Australia. Start out. We have over 300 staff globally, 21 offices, and we operate sending educators from all over the world to Australia, New Zealand, and the UK. We'll be focusing on Australia today, but if you are interested in New Zealand or in the UK, again, the webinar page has great information about those locations specifically as well. All right, so one of the main questions we get is where in Australia can we teach? Now, Mark, Claudia, and myself, as well as my coworker Olivia, all taught down in Melbourne, depending on how correct you want to be with the Aussies. It is probably the most popular area that our teaching candidates go for a few different reasons, but we do have locations elsewhere as well. We also are able to offer supply work as well as contracts in New South Wales. We have contracts work up in Queensland, mainly around Brisbane and the greater area there. We also have contract and supply work in Perth, Western Australia, and we're able to have early childhood education work in all of these locations, including the ACT as well. We're also moving into the Northern Territory as well, so if you are more interested in regional type settings, we're moving there as well. I'm mainly going to be talking about the state of Victoria, the city of Melbourne today, just because it's where most of our educators go. But if you are interested in another area, we can absolutely talk about it. There's a Sydney spotlight on the webinar page as well, if you're interested in working there. All right, a big question we get, I'm looking back at this, realizing I did not change the picture. This is in the UK. That's on me. A big question that we get is what kind of work offerings are available? What kind of work can you go over to do? A lot of our teachers are new grads, but we support people at all points in their career. So are there short-term positions available? Are there long-term permanent roles available? Can you secure a job before you leave Canada? So yes, yes, and yes. We have a range of different types of work, including the types of roles that we hire for. So just to quickly go through, of course, we're going to be talking about teaching roles. We also work in the early childhood spaces, so ECEs, daycare centers. We also hire for support staff, teaching assistant, similar-ish to an EA type role here in Canada, but there are some differences with qualifications and things there. OSHC, out of school hours care, as well as executive opportunities for those looking for a more long-term move. Probably the main type of work that we have, especially for our new grads, is going to be people who are coming over to be what we would here call a supply teacher, a substitute teacher, a TTOC for those out in BC. In Australia, it's called a CRT, so a casual relief teacher. So you can think of us as being like a school board in this setting. So you have some flexibility, you can pick your own schedule, you can work with a bunch of different schools, network across them. There will be opportunities that pop up to cover contract roles as well. Those can span anywhere from a couple of weeks to a couple of months. Think of like an LTO type work, and you can experience a range of settings and diversify your experience. If you're interested in supplying, but you want a bit more consistency, we're also able to offer our guaranteed work program, which we call our ambassador program. We'll go over this a little bit more one-on-one if we have a call to talk about this, because there are some certain terms and conditions, as in it doesn't start from the first day of school. The school year needs to get underway. But essentially, this is for flexible supply teachers. So if you're willing to cover a range of grades, if you're happy to travel, we can guarantee you that we'll get you 5 days worth of work per week. And if we can't get you work for those days, we can still pay you out. This also includes mainstream and special education settings. This is another big difference between the Canadian and the Australian school system, is their special education system. Won't dive into it a ton today. Again, we can talk about it on our call. There is also a webinar on it if you want to learn more about that. If you're looking for something a little bit more stable, we work in both contract settings and permanent settings. A permanent move would be something where you're going over on a longer term visa. So we'll explore the different visa options, but this would be for someone who's looking to move to Australia for 2+ years. Often these visas lead to permanent residency, so looking to stay for a long time. If you're just looking to go for a short time, we do work with contract blocks anywhere between 2 weeks up to 6 months. That could be covering a vacation, could be covering sick leave, could be covering maternity leave, just depending. Think of us still like a school board, so we're limited by the contract roles that are available to us. So if you are a PE teacher, like Claudia mentioned, there's a very good chance that contract roles will pop up while you're there. But if you want to arrive mid-semester, their school year is very different. We can't guarantee that there's going to be a contract role ready for you on the first day that you land. We'll work with you and the schools around you, but you can always fall back on CRT, supply teaching work, while you're waiting for the right contract to pop up. All right, let's talk about visas. Now, the two biggest things to be able to teach in Australia are going to be, number one, what visa you're going over on to make sure you have working rights in the country, and number two, getting your teaching license. If you have those two things, everything else can fall into place. So the questions were, do we support with visas immigration? Is there a minimum requirement for how long I need to stay for? And are there age restrictions on the visas? The most common visa that our educators go over on are the working holiday visas. So for Canadians, it's the 417 working holiday visa. For US citizens, it's the 462. There are some slight differences between these. The biggest one being that for Canadians, we're eligible up to 35, and that's inclusive of your 35th year. So if you've turned 35, it's not too late. You have until you turn 36. For US citizens, they've only got until 30. Same thing, inclusive of your 30th year, but you do lose out on those extra years once you're in your 30s. It's a really simple visa to apply for. The cost is currently $650 Australian. Essentially, all you need is a valid passport. You need proof that you have 5,000 Australian in savings, and usually no criminal record, and it's done in a few days to a few weeks at most. This 5,000 number is a number provided by the government for how much they want to have you coming into the country with. It's also a good ballpark for a comfortable safety net to get started in Australia. We'll go through some of the costs. There's not a ton of upfront costs as far as the visas and your teaching license go, but remember, flights are going to be decently expensive, and you will have to account for a couple of weeks in Australia to get yourself set up, get your bank account going, all of that other stuff before you can actually start working. So you'll want to have a bit of a safety net to fall back on until you're up and working in Australia. Oh, if you are over 35 or you are looking to make a more long-term move to Australia, there are a few other visa options available for you. The 482 visa is probably the most attractive option, but it's a very hard one to come by. So this is essentially known as a sponsorship visa. A school would sponsor you to work there. The visa is going to last for 2 to 4 years. You're tied to your employer for those 2 to 4 years, but there are pathways to permanent residency and citizenship after that visa expires. Now, this is a fantastic visa. You only need 1 year of experience. However, as I mentioned, it's very hard to come by. So currently we're looking at secondary math, science, English teachers or special education teachers. But there's limited roles, limited schools who have the capacity and the funding to do this type of visa. If you know Australia is where you want to go, it's maybe where you want to retire, the best visa to get into Australia is a skilled worker visa. There's a few different ones depending on if you're going state specific, all of Australia, 189, 190, 491, for example. It is open for both secondary and primary teachers. It grants you full working rights and you have choice of where you work, so you're not tied to any employer. It also has pathways to permanency and permanent residency and citizenship for those under 45. So this visa does also have an age range in there. So if you're over 45, your only option is going to be this temporary skills shortage visa. The skilled worker visa is fantastic. It does take a bit longer. So wait times right now are about 10 to 12 months. And it's a points-based system. So it's not a guaranteed visa the same way a working holiday visa is, but it's a really good pathway if you're looking to go long-term. If this is the pathway you're looking to go, our recommendation is to speak to a licensed migration agency. We are not migration agent, so I can't give information about this visa beyond what it says on the government website, but certainly a great option if you're looking to relocate to Australia long term. All right, another big one. What are the requirements for teachers to teach in Australia? And one we had come up, if you are certified primary junior in Canada, but you want to teach in secondary, do you need to do your AQs? How does all that work? So to quickly address the second one first, the Australian school system works differently than the Canadian school system. So you can technically teach outside of your qualification. If you're being a CRT, you'll be allowed to supply teach from K, or they call kindergarten prep, from prep all the way through year 12. If you have experience in a subject, but maybe you don't have the AQ for that, so maybe you have a math and science undergrad, but you have a science is your major in your Bachelor of Education, but you have all that math experience, you may be able to go into a contract role for math. It's going to depend on the school and their judgment. But if you are certified primary junior and you want to get some experience in those secondary settings, potentially before you come back to Ontario and decide where you want to teach, you can absolutely do that. The requirements for teachers to teach in Australia. The great thing is the requirements in Australia match up pretty well with the schooling in Canada, pretty much countrywide. If you are a US educator, this is a really important one to take a good look at the website and see if your qualifications match up, because it's not as cut and dry as it is for Canadians, just with all the different pathways to becoming a teacher. In Australia, the registration is going to vary state by state, same as how in Canada you have to be licensed in the province that you're working in. We'll talk specifically about the Victorian Institute of Teachers, that's the VIT. This one you can apply for before you leave the country. You can only submit it up to 3 months before you're arriving in Australia. So you can't do it too far out. It has to be close to your arrival time, and it typically takes about 6 to 8 weeks to be granted with a cost of $167. This 6 to 8 week number also depends on the time of year. I would recommend for anyone, if you're arriving at a busy time, to do it close to that 3 month mark so you don't risk arriving and not having your VIT granted. The minimum requirements are pretty much the same across Australia. There might be some differences, but what they're looking for is a minimum 4 years of postgraduate education. At least one of those years needs to be a teacher education program for either primary or secondary school, and you need to have 45 days of supervised practice teaching, practicums for most of us. If you have a Bachelor of Education from Canada, you likely meet these requirements. If you have a different educational background to become a teacher, I strongly recommend you go through and check if the requirements match up with your educational experience to make sure that you will be qualified to teach in Australia. If you're a TA, that is a teaching assistant, it's technically an unqualified role. We're just looking for you to have experience working with children. If you are an ECE, there is another licensing board that works across all of Australia. That's your ACE-CQA, where you can get qualified as an ECE. I really clearly did not give this a second look over with all these UK pictures, or maybe I'm just a big fan of Big Ben. When is the best time to arrive? How long does the process take? When should you get started? I'll talk about the school year quickly, and then I'll also throw it to you, Claudia and Mark, to talk about when you arrived and your thoughts with this. My biggest thing that I always say with Melbourne is it is the city in Australia that gets a bit of a colder winter. We're not talking Canadian temperatures. Don't worry too much. But bear in mind, July, August, September is going to be winter. So the seasons are flipped. The school year is also very different. So they begin their school year end of January, and it runs through until their Christmas/summer break starts mid-December. So very different school year to what we're used to. They also get nice breaks in between each term. So you're usually only teaching for 9 to 10 weeks before you have a 2-week break. So it's fantastic if you want to go and travel around Australia, go to New Zealand, go to Asia, wherever you want to go. We typically recommend getting the process started about 6 months before your arrival. It can be done a little bit less time. You can certainly come talk to us earlier if you know when you want to go, but usually the 6-month mark is what we recommend for people when they want to go. We have 2 main waves of educators who arrive. It's usually a bunch in January and a bunch in September, just because of how the Canadian school year falls. I personally arrived right at the beginning of the summer. So I got there December 22nd, 2022. So they had just started their break. I will say I loved when I arrived. It wasn't great for work because they were obviously had gone off for 6 weeks, but it was beautiful. I got to have a hot Christmas. I loved getting there in December, but it's also a very busy time. So finding accommodation is going to be a bit more competitive. But I was there for the beginning of the school year. I got to be there essentially for the full school year. So it was great to see students from the first day of school through till the end. But I knew going in that I had at least 6 weeks where I wasn't going to be working, that I was responsible for funding myself. So that's something important to keep in mind with your arrival time. Claudia, I think you said you got there mid-year. Is that right?
Yes. So I arrived in the middle of July. So I guess beginning of term 3. And I basically started working as soon as I arrived because the work was available and I wanted to work as much as I could up until the Christmas break, just so I could travel during Christmas time. So yeah, I arrived and I started work right away. And I guess it was technically still winter when I arrived, but definitely not as cold as the Canadian winters, which was a big perk. But yeah, so and then I worked up until the start of term 4. Well, I traveled in between term 3 and term 4, and then worked up till the Christmas break. And yeah, I had no issues with like getting work as soon as I arrived, and I did. So, and in terms of accommodations as well, I think we'll get into that like a little bit more later too. But yeah, when I first arrived, we stayed in Airbnb for 5 days, and then I was able to secure like a short-term accommodation for a month. Sorry, it's a bit noisy where I am right now. I moved over with 2 other Canadian teachers, so we were actually able to secure a year lease after our short-term accommodation. So I went from being in an Airbnb for 5 days to get started to doing a short-term sublet to a year lease because there were 3 of us. But yeah, I think we talked a bit about accommodations in a little bit here as well.
Awesome. That's nice. So, I mean, I always say like it's hard leaving the Canadian summer to go over to Australian winter, but if you're going to do the full year anyways, you're going to be there through all of the seasons. So it's a great time for work because it's very, very busy in term 3. So nice that you can get in and just start going right away.
Yeah, exactly.
Mark, do you remember when you arrived?
Yeah, I was going to say, so I got there in May, so kind of start of term 2.
Nice.
Which, yeah, what was kind of a hard transition because you feel like you're missing out on Canadian summer. So I basically did a double winter. But the nice thing is when I came back in 2023, I had January, February, March, like the whole Aussie summer. And I came back in May. I got my 10 supply days in to stay on the school board and like that I'm currently with. And then I got a second summer. So the first year was kind of tough because you have that double winter, but then I got a double summer the next year. The other thing I really liked about my time was, there was tons of work available term 2, term 3. So that was amazing. And like Claudia, I was able to save up tons of money for like December when December came around and January to travel. And I think the nice thing too was when I first moved there, I definitely had a few friends from ANZUK UK as well. They came a little bit later than me. So when I got there first, it was kind of winter. So I was able to look for housing, settle myself in, start making friends. And because it was winter, I didn't feel like I was missing out on too much. And then when December, January, summer came around, by then I had tons of money. I had lots of friends that I had made like through the company and even some local friends. So I feel like, there's pros and cons. When I first got there, it was definitely tough. the colder weather and just being like in a work grind. But I guess it all paid off in the end. Whereas Victoria, you got the nice, like, beautiful summer Australian weather to start. So
Yeah,
pros and cons to both, right?
it's so true. And I mean, that's the big thing that I say to everyone is there's no right or wrong time to arrive. The nice thing is we hire on a rolling basis. So if you want to be there term 1, term 2, term 3, term 4, we'll be there to work with you when you get there. There's definitely pros and cons to everything. Mark, you brought up a really great point as well, and this is something we talk to a lot of new grads with, is if you are a new grad, and you're not sure when to go and you're thinking of January, a phenomenal thing you can do is get on with your local school board for September, October, November, December. Get your allotted days. You'll stay on the school board list for the next year, so you're not missing out on any local opportunities. You get your pension going, you get your year started, so you can still retire young, plus get to do the Australia experience in between. So it's a really smart way to do that. All right, perfect. Okay, we'll talk about this a little bit. How did you find accommodation? How expensive is it to live in Australia? Is transportation reliable to get around? Are there spiders? I'll start. My number one question, are there spiders? Yes, but especially in Melbourne, they're not that bad. Claudia and Mark, I'll let you guys talk in case you've had other experiences. I'm terrified of spiders. The one redeeming quality of Melbourne getting a bit colder than the rest of Australia is that the really scary snakes and spiders can't live down there. They need the hot, warm climate. So you got to throw on a sweater for a few months, but there's no big creepy crawlies living in your shoes. So that's great. I won't go on for too long because, like I said, watch the accommodation webinar, but I had short-term accommodation lined up for when I got there. I actually subletted from a local teacher because I arrived during summer, so I was able to stay in her apartment for 4 weeks, which was fantastic, and do my apartment search when I got there. I ended up renting a room in a house with just a couple. It was a Brit and a Kiwi, and myself, who all living in Australia. I lived up in North Melbourne in a neighborhood called Coburg, which I absolutely love. It's still to this day one of my favorite places that I've lived, just with the walkability and accessibility in the neighborhood. Expense wise, I didn't find it super expensive. I also live in the GTA. So if you're coming from somewhere that is a smaller town or that has a more affordable cost of living, it is a major city, a major global city. So it's not a cheap place to live. But if you live in the GTA or the Vancouver area or really any major city in Canada, there's no huge sticker shock as far as what prices are like. So I didn't find it too expensive, especially with making decent money in Australia. My day-to-day costs I found very, very reasonable. Transportation is great. I would say most of our educators don't get a car. You're able to get around on trains, trams, buses. They're well ahead of Canada in the transportation department, so way easier to get around on public transportation. But yeah, I'll go through some of our advice, but Claudia, do you want to talk about, I guess you talked about how you found your accommodation. Where about did you live? Do you have any other comments on accommodation?
Yeah, so again, when I first arrived, we had secured an Airbnb accommodation in the CBD just to get us started, just to get us settled in. So we were there for about 5 days. And prior to going over, so we were able to secure like a 1-month short-term sub in Hawthorne East. So it's in one of the eastern suburbs of the city, and it was a beautiful neighborhood. There were some really great schools that I worked at in that area. And so while we were living in the short-term accommodation for the 1 month, we went to house showings every weekend because we were trying to secure like a yearly lease because there were 3 of us. If I was by myself, I would have looked on, there's some great like Facebook pages, like Fairy Floss, I think it's in the slideshow coming up soon. But yeah, so we mainly looked through, we looked on a few real estate like websites, Fairy Floss, and we were trying to find like a 3-bedroom, and we were able to finally secure one. So we signed the year lease, and I'm from North Bay, Ontario, which is a smaller town. And so in terms of the cost for the yearly lease that we were in, it was about double the price in rent that what I pay here in North Bay. But again, like you mentioned, Victoria, very comparable to like if you live in the major cities here in Canada in terms of cost of living. And then, yeah, so transportation, I also didn't have a car. I just took trains, trams, and buses to work every day. And honestly, Melbourne is really like, I think it has one of the best transportation systems in the world based on where I've been. So I had no issues like getting to work in the morning or getting home after school. It was actually kind of fun living in it. It was my first time living in a big city like that. I am from a really small town, so yeah, it was cool getting used. It took a few weeks to get used to the transit system,
Yep.
but once I got the hang of it, it was yeah, it was pretty good. And oh, sorry. So after I forgot to mention where I was living for the year lease. I was in Caulfield North, which is in the south side of the city. So it was about like a 25-minute tram ride into the CBD, and I really liked Caulfield North. It was a really nice neighborhood, lots of parks. It was close-ish, about 4 kilometers to St. Kilda, which is where the one beach is, one of the popular beaches in Melbourne. So it was a really nice location. Sometimes after work, we just went into the water, watch the sunset. So lots of good vibes around the neighborhood I was living in. And then so in terms of spiders, I have one spider story that I'll share if we have time.
Yeah.
So I didn't see many while I was living in the city. Of course, there were a few kitchen spiders that I came across, but they were very small. But there was this one weekend I really got into running when I was living in Melbourne. And that's how I made a lot of my friends, was through run clubs there. In addition to like the ANZUK social events, I really got into running. It's a very active city. So I was doing a half marathon down the Great Ocean Road, and a bunch of us were at an Airbnb, and there was a spider. I can't even show you how big it was with my hands. I'm holding my phone with my one hand, but it was on the pool house like handle. So at this Airbnb, there's a pool house, and anyways, there's this giant spider on the pool house handle, and so no one slept in the pool house. But that was I don't think I've screamed so loud before. I'd never seen a spider like that, and I was with some locals, and they see them all the time. But to me, it was like, oh my goodness. So yeah, that's my only spider story. There's definitely more in the outback, like more of the warmer climate, but I didn't see any like large spiders like that in the city. So yeah, thankfully, I was thankful for that.
Yeah, the locals are funny too, because they'll go, oh, like the big ones you don't have to worry about, like the small ones are the ones that are dangerous. I'm like, well, don't tell me that either. That's not helpful for me to know. I'd like to see no spiders.
Yeah. So I think
awesome.
yeah. Did anyone have any like questions to anything there that I mentioned, or I think that covered it, Victoria?
I think so. Mark,
Yeah.
where about were you?
Yeah, sweet. So when I first arrived, I did an Airbnb, I think it was for about 2 weeks in South Yarra, which is lovely but very
Great
bougie.
area.
So like great cafes, definitely the most expensive part of Melbourne. For good reason. It's beautiful there, like everything's lovely. When I ended up signing a lease for the year, I think I found it through flatmates.com.au, which is where you get a lot of the housing from. I think it was on the list that you guys provided of places to look. And I was living in Richmond, which I really liked. It was a part of the ambassador like list of places because it's got some of the best transportation links. Trams run all through it, and the good thing is it's pretty central. It's right beside downtown, so like you're close to getting downtown. You're close to getting to the north area, which is a lot of like cafes and a bit more of like hipster vibes. And then it's also equally as close to like the south, where you can go to the St. Kilda beach and stuff. So I kind of like being pretty central, and it was more affordable than a lot of other areas too. So that was great. And then the flatmates, like I said, I met them online, and it was great. There was 2 local Aussie guys and a girl from the States. And so myself and her, we actually did a Thanksgiving one time, and it was the first time the Australian guys ever had a Thanksgiving. They invited all their friends. We invited all of my Canadian friends, her American friends. So yeah, that was great. And now I still keep in contact with them all. I got to go down to LA a few months ago to go see Cynthia. So yeah, that's one of the best parts I
That's
would say
awesome.
is Yeah, living by yourself is great, but I think especially if you're making a move somewhere new, I wouldn't hesitate to live with other people. And I found that, especially compared to at least Toronto and Canada, I would say people there are more open to shared housing. Whereas it seems like Toronto, it's kind of one bedrooms is the thing to do. Um, I felt like in Melbourne, everybody was so social, and I just
Yeah.
made so many
How
almost more friends there.
Yeah, like house sharing through your 20s
Yeah,
into your 30s is way more the norm for like young professionals, whereas I think in Canada it's like that's a university thing, and then
yeah,
people don't really do that so much, but that's very much the norm for them down there.
big time. Yeah, I mean, when I moved over, I was 27, and my roommates were 29, 31, and like 33. So
Yeah.
I was the youngest in the group. But yeah, accommodation, that's how I found that. Expenses, I would say I actually saved some money living in Australia compared to living like in the GTA, Toronto, Hamilton area.
Yeah,
Um, I mean, I bought myself like a new iPhone. You're getting
great
paid
deal.
pretty well, like with CRT money. And the way I was even calculating it out with the difference in pay. So I'm sure most school boards are the same, but like in Ontario, most of them pay around 280 a day. And I think in Australia it's about 400 Aussie, which is about 350 Canadian. So that's
Yeah,
$70 more a day, which if you multiply that over a week, 350 more a week, which over a month is like $1,400. Prices are a little more expensive in Australia. Things are a little bit more expensive, but 1,400 is almost the cost of like you know what I mean, like the rental itself
yeah,
for the whole month.
yeah,
So I think that $1,400, even if food is a little bit pricier, rent is a little bit pricier, that 14 extra $100 you make if you work every day. And that was just with CRTing when I signed. I moved on to for the second half, the second 6 months, I moved on to like a permanent contract, and there was even a bit more money to be made there. So I would say it was actually cheaper. I
yeah,
saved money compared to life in like Toronto and Hamilton
yeah.
right
It's
now.
expensive here.
Um, Expensive, and then also transportation, definitely fantastic. I mean, Melbourne was amazing for that. Trams everywhere. The trains were great. I also never had a car, and yes, you have to pay for public transport, but you don't have to pay for a car. So here we pay for gas, license, insurance, all that stuff. So I'd say it's pretty comparable, and it's nice to have public transport. And I managed to luck out and got a lot of jobs pretty center of the city. I'm not sure if it's like my teachables or the timing I went over, but I got really great options, and so I was even able to like bike to work a lot of days. I was able to walk to work sometimes at like Richmond High School. So walking, biking, that was amazing. Like 8 months of the year, it was possible. No crazy spider stories. I mean, I saw
Ideal.
two big ones in the whole year I was there. I saw maybe two big ones, but once again, yeah, they're not dangerous. They don't bite, and they're actually good for getting rid of mosquitoes. So we trapped it and then put it in the backyard.
Great positivity. It
We love
still
it.
could not be me. Amazing. I will fly through some of this. I think we touched on pretty much all of the points. And like I said, if where to find accommodation is a big question you have, please watch the webinar because it goes so much more into depth. But as we all said, temporary accommodation for when you get there and actually do the jobs or do the house search on the ground is so much easier. If you're going to be living with people, you want to go meet them. You'll want to see the different areas. There's so many different neighborhoods and suburbs within the city that you want to go see where you're going to be living. We have a Facebook group that I'll talk more about, flatmates.com. Fairy Floss Facebook group is a really huge way that people look. There's also lots of smaller groups, domain.com, realestate.com, all those different things. We can also act as a rental referee. So if you have a contract or if you're on our ambassador program and you need us to sign to say you're employed, we can absolutely do that. All right. Last thing, then we'll jump into some more of the fun questions. And if you do have any questions, like I said, feel free to put them in the chat. How do you get started? So number one is initial contact and interview with the Canadian team. So we will go through any of your initial questions, find out about what you teach, what you want to teach, make sure that our offerings line up with what you're looking for. Step two is registering. So once you've decided where you want to go, when you want to go, you're ready to do this, you'll register to work with us. We'll get your references. as well as provide you with our guide that has information for everything you need to know through the process. So how to apply for your visa, how to apply for your teaching license, bank accounts, health insurance, all the things that you need to think about. Your next step is contact from a global consultant. So you'll have a consultant in Melbourne or Sydney, wherever you're going. That's going to be your point of contact on the ground once you get there. You'll go into the office, you'll do your onboarding with them. You'll also talk to these people all the time because they'll be calling you with work, they'll be calling you with contract opportunities, they'll be calling to check in. So this is going to be your person on the ground in Australia to chat with you before your departure and also while you're there. Step 4 is just doing your compliance. So everything has different timelines. We'll help walk you through it, but making sure that your visa, your teaching license, and everything else is lined up before you head over. Step 5, you're there, you're cleared for work. Like I said, you'll go in, you'll do all the paperwork that you need to be employed locally. You are going to be employed locally. So I know there was a question about bank accounts. You do need to have an Australian bank account set up. Once all that's through, you're cleared for work. And then step 6, you're in the classroom. We'll still be there with you the whole time. Like I said, we have our team in Australia to answer any questions. They have PD sessions as well as social sessions. We will also be checking in with you from the Canadian side because we want to hear how things are going. We want to see your pictures. We would love if when you return, you want to join us for webinars or come to our university fairs with us to talk to other people about it. So from the initial questions all the way through well after you've returned, we'll be there to assist you along the way. We'll go into this last ones. I just remembered too that there was a question before that I did not address, which was how long can you do this for? This goes back to the working holiday visa. The working holiday visa is a once in a lifetime visa that's good for 1 year. There are ways to extend it that again, we can talk about more after, but it's good for 1 year. You can come for less time than that. We really don't recommend any less than 3 months just to make it worthwhile as far as getting the visa, getting your teaching license, getting settled, getting everything set up, and when you're able to actually work. But if you know you only want to go for 1 term, you can absolutely do that. We'll support you with it. But it is a once in a lifetime visa. So once you've used it, it's gone. Yeah. I'm going to come back to these questions because I know I technically ended this at 8:15. So for those who are leaving, I'll just quickly answer making new friends because that's also a big one. Community events are a huge part of what we do and what's really important to us. So we host regular social events before you go and after you arrive so you can meet people. We have a few coming up. Kingston, I'm going to be there next Thursday, July 3rd for those in Kingston. We've got our Vancouver date set for July 15th. And then Toronto for August 17th as well. We haven't sent out any correspondence about that, but please save the date if you are around. We also have a Facebook group and welcome events for when you get there. But I will turn it over so we can finish with this. If you do have more questions, I know we're at the end of our time technically, but feel free to drop them in the chat. But Mark, I'll throw it to you. You don't have to answer all of these questions, but overall, time in Australia, what did you like? What was the biggest change? Overall thoughts, how'd you make friends? All that good stuff.
Sure. I mean, I always still say to this day, like it was the best year of my life. Like no bar. It was amazing. I guess some of these quickly, making friends. So a lot of the friends I made were before I even arrived through the Facebook group. I'm not sure if you guys still do a Facebook group for ANZUK UK, but yeah, perfect. So I met quite a lot of other Canadian educators. We still keep in contact to this day, which is cute, and might even do like a cottage weekend. So that was nice because we could also ask each other questions before we got there. So I met a lot of friends through there. Met a couple of friends actually through Bumble BFF. So keep yourself open to using like online and apps and stuff. Yeah, I met some great people through that introduced me to all their friends, and I got to spend like New Year's Eve at like a local house party with just all Australians and me. So that was pretty special. Yeah, so I would say, oh, go ahead.
I kind of say that it's like dating, trying to make friends as an adult, especially like as a teacher, you know, you go to the socials, you meet people, but you spend your day with kids. So it's not like you're spending your days with other adults. So like you got to put yourself out there, you go on the Bumble BFF, join the run clubs, like you said, Claudia. Like you go to these social events to like put yourself out there. It's like dating.
Yeah, exactly. And there's, I'm sure, lots of like sports clubs as well. Netball's big there. If you get
Definitely.
into footy, which is like the local, I didn't find massive differences between Canadian and Australian schools. Like as a CRT, you're teaching kind of what they give you. It's similar to supply teaching here. It was nice that I was able to supply in elementary as well. So in here, I can only do public high school. You have to choose high school or elementary with Ontario public boards, whereas there I could kind of teach the full range, which I loved because I've been working in camps for my whole life. So I also like teaching the young kids, which was nice. And then when I took a full or a 6 month contract as like a high school math and science teacher, there wasn't really main curriculum differences. Like everything's pretty much the same that we teach in math and science here. Slight differences in when you teach the units, what grade, but I didn't struggle really at all in the teaching aspect. And then favorite parts of living there and lifestyle, it's very laid back. People are very friendly, open, and living in a big city, yeah, you get to experience so many events. The Australian Open, I saw the Great Barrier Reef. I went to Sydney for like World Pride. There were just so many amazing events that I got to do, and yeah, people there, especially the people you meet through ANZUK UK and the people you meet if you use like apps and stuff, the Bumble BFF. Everyone has that same travel friendship mindset. So I actually found the friends I have in Canada are great, but they're mostly like friends from growing up, friends from high school. And then I find here a lot of the times after university, people kind of settle down and are a bit quieter. Whereas I found over there, young adults in their 20s and 30s really love to be social. So yeah, lifestyle there, laid back, but good times.
Amazing. Oh, it makes me want to go back so bad just hearing you talk about your time there. I'm like, I want to do
Let's
it
all
all
go.
again. Claudia, I'll throw it to you in just 1 second. I just saw we had a question pop up around time off. There aren't super specifics around time off. If you're on the ambassador program, you can mark yourself as not available to work. That's totally fine. They understand that a lot of our educators are traveling educators. People want to go take vacation. So you just mark yourself as not available. You're just not paid for the days that you are choosing not to work. If you're in a contract with a school, obviously that's a bit different. But if you are just there as a supply teacher on the ambassador program, you're welcome to take time off to go on vacation, or if it's a nice Thursday and the sun's out and you would rather be at the beach than be at school, take the day off and go be at the beach. Like this is part of the beauty of spending a year living in Australia, especially for most of us. We're only going to get to do this once in our lives. So like take a day, go enjoy, take the vacation, take the long weekend, all that. Claudia, thoughts on differences? How did you like it? Favorite things?
Okay, I'll start with the lifestyle. Yeah. So, well, honestly, my entire year that I was there, it was truly life-changing. I think anyone who has the opportunity to experience something like this, like I think they should just do it. If you're contemplating doing it or not, I would just highly recommend you to do it. It's yeah, coming back to Ontario, I feel like a whole different person. I learned a lot about myself being overseas and obviously moving away from home. It can be scary. Obviously, it takes a lot of bravery and courage to do something like this. Australia is very far from Canada. So, but yeah, I'm really happy that I took that step. And yeah, the whole experience was life changing for me. The lifestyle, like Mark was saying, it's very laid back. Everyone's very friendly there, very chill. And so, yeah, and just I learned how to surf when I was there as well. And so I told myself before I moved there that I've always wanted to learn how to surf. So it was really cool being able to surf down the Great Ocean Road. There's a few different spots. And then there's also a place in Melbourne called Urban Surf where there's like man-made waves there. It's sort of like a wave pool. And so I did a few surfing lessons there as well with some friends. So yeah, overall the lifestyle, I think it's like one of the best in the whole world. Again, I was living there for a year, so I kind of became accustomed to the lifestyle there, like lots of cafes. I basically spent my weekends going to run clubs, doing lots of running, and then enjoying a nice cafe after that. And so I did meet a lot of my friends through ANZUK UK. I attended a few social events. There was like a barbecue I went to one time in the eastern suburb, forget which, Gels Park, I think is where it was. So it's in one of the eastern suburbs there. And then I also went, there was one other social event at the College Lawn Hotel, which is in Paran. So I met a few educators there. And then I also met a lot of locals and a lot of people from all around the world through the run clubs that I was a part of. So I did attend many of those. And so I met a lot of friends through there. And we ended up doing actually a lot of traveling together with a lot of the people that I met. And so, yeah, I really liked meeting people from all around the world with different cultures, different backgrounds, different ways of life. And yeah, it widened my perspective on many things. And yeah, I also really enjoyed the food in Melbourne. There's tons of food options everywhere. So coming from a small town, we don't have a ton of options, but it was actually very difficult to pick places to go to eat in Melbourne because you have so many options. But the food there was amazing. So that was another one of my favorite parts of living there, is just trying all the different foods. And yeah, I also just really enjoyed being able to travel during the school terms. I was able to go to Southeast Asia. I was able to go to New Zealand, Tasmania, and then all around Australia. Did the East Coast, the West Coast, the Northern Territory. And but yeah, I went to 7 countries in the whole 12 months I was there. So it was a ton of traveling. But I was basically working to travel the whole time I was there. But yeah, I was grateful for all the opportunities that that came my way when I was there. And in terms of the biggest difference from Canadian schools to Australian, like Mark said, I didn't find a huge difference. But because I was teaching phys ed, I did have to learn a few new sports that they have in Australia that we don't teach here in Ontario, really. So those sports were cricket, netball, and footy, so AFL. I remember having to teach my first netball lesson, and the students kind of carried me through it because, yeah, it's basically basketball with no backboard. You can't run with the ball. You can only step or pivot when you have the ball, and it's very interesting if you want to look it up. It's yeah, so in terms of teaching phys ed, I just kind of had to learn how to teach a few new sports. The students helped, and the teachers there were amazing. I got to work at some really amazing schools. I worked at some private schools, public schools, all girls schools, all boys schools. So I got a wide range of teaching experience, but overall I found the curriculum was very similar. I just had to adapt to some of the sports there. But everyone's very supportive. All of the staff, all the schools I worked at were amazing. And I mainly worked in high school. I did do a little bit of primary. In Ontario, I'm qualified in junior intermediate, but I was able to teach both primary and secondary there. So yeah, overall, yeah, the difference wasn't too crazy, just those sports. And then, yeah.
I think I also taught PE, and I could talk about Aussie rules football for ages. I won't tonight because we've got to get off, but it's the craziest sport. I think it's someone designed it in their backyard. Like, it's just beyond. And I had 6th graders who were tackling each other full on, and I was like, oh my, this would never fly in Canada. This is crazy. But it was so fun. So that is.
Can I just add as well?
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I feel like a big difference as a Canadian living there, teaching there, is I feel like you feel like you're a celebrity in the schools. As soon as the kids hear your accent, you're like, they love it. Like, here, nobody cares when you're supply teaching, right?
Yeah.
You go to an Australian school and they hear the Canadian accent, I got called Mr. Canada because I guess my last name's Mr. Campbell, so close enough.
I love that. Also, if you need to kill time in class, like if a teacher didn't leave you enough stuff to cover the whole class, you're just like, let's talk about Canada for half an hour. What are your questions? Or I would do, if I was teaching primary, when I was doing the role in the morning, I'd say, guess my accent. And I would go through their names and let them each guess where I'm from. And all over the world, you get everywhere. Almost never Canada, but it's a fantastic way to kill 15 minutes in the morning and get started. Okay, I think that's all of our questions. Are there any other questions in the chat for those who are still hanging on with us? Thank you for those who have stuck around. I will send out this recording tomorrow as well, along with the whole Vimeo folder of all of our webinars. So if you want to take a look at Teaching in Australia, that goes over the visas and everything in a bit more depth, the finding accommodation, all that stuff. If there's nothing else, Claudia, Mark, thank you both so much for joining. It's so much fun to talk to other returners about your experiences, and I love hearing about it. And Claudia and I were whispering before our call about how if we could get a second working holiday visa, we'd be over there in a second to go do it all again. And this is making me want to do that so much more. But thank you for joining us. Thank you for all that came and tuned in tonight. And I hope to talk to all of you very soon.
Take care. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you.